Morales here, returning for my last episode on NF prison gang members who belong to regiments within the organization. These key individuals, both past and present, were very much involved in spreading the NF out to the streets from California Department of Corrections institutions. In this final segment, I will be covering the Greater San Juan Regiment. I could say so much more about San Juan. I used to cruise Story and King back in the day and shop at Hammer and Lewis for my khakis. My compadre's first cousin was Vinny Hines, a champion boxer from that same area. In the southern part of Santa Clara County, actually closer to Salinas than San Juan, and is known as an agriculture area, whereas San Juan these days is a big city. It is my understanding that Gilas operated on its own under the leadership of Black Bob Vasquez and his cuñado or brother-in-law, Ezequiel Conejo Lopez, in the 1970s throughout the early 80s. The official NF theme song, or corrido, was called El Mensaje de la Nuestra Familia, which was recorded and put on 45-size vinyl records by Ezequiel Conejo Lopez family. Crazy Joe Guerrero Reyes was an NF lieutenant who also operated under Black Bob, but DO'd in 1979. John Rockjaw Martinez and Patrick Snake Buhin were also documented as NF, as was Philip Ojeda de Gilas, who was involved in PCP cells and did time at the Bay in the 1990s. In addition to the Vasquez familia, the Cordodas from Gilas were deep in the mix of the NF during the 1970s and 80s. It is interesting that some of the Cordodas had Texas syndicate ties, and one brother even had Mexican mafia ties. Flavio Garza was from Gilas and killed on March 22nd, 1977 by the NF. I had Gino Buster Diaz, who was from Gilas at New Folsom State Prison during the late 1980s. And I remember that he had a lot of respect on the yard. Gary Conejo Lucero was delegated to run Gilas and took over NF operations in 2011 from Luis Wicked Varrios, who was involved in bank robberies for the NF. Brown Bob Viramontes is one of the most well-known NF to come out of Morgan Hill. Brown Bob was very closely associated with Black Bob Vasquez out of Gilas. And Brown Bob appears on the cover of my NF book, standing here far left as a very young NF member at DVI, who was partially responsible for approving the XIV bonds. Brown Bob was killed by the NF in April 1999, during what I know a lot of NF considered to be a shady move, and they dropped out, in part due to his murder. Eric Baby G. Zarata was from Milpitas and listed as an NF associate, who was housed at Corcoran Shoe. I do not know his current status, as he does not come up in the CDC inmate locator these days. William Flaco Vic was also an NF associate from Milpitas, Varrios Maschingon to be exact. I knew him to be very active in NF politics, even though he was only sponsored for membership and never totally accepted as a carnal. He ended up dropping out and is currently a YouTuber who has appeared on my channel, and he is one of the best historians on the NF, as he has had many past members from the late 1960s, 70s, and 80s on his shows. A Filipino inmate from San Juan who ran with the NF at DVI is credited for designing the official NF symbol that has been seen in many pictures and drawings. I've heard others giving credit to Joker Mendoza, and he may have drawn this one signed at CIM in Chino in the early 1970s by the NF, depicted here on the right side. But I believe the original one was actually found in a house in Ontario after a raid on Tarzan Castaneda de Pomona 12th Street. Personally, I think some people may be confusing these two drawings, the one done by Joker, addressed to Tarzan, shown on the right, and the one on the left, with Tarzan signed on the bottom. Regardless of which story is correct, Shark was killed at DVI in May 1974 by MM member Spider Herrera de Wilmas and was assisted by Manuel the Mad Korean and Nervas from San Diego. In December 1977, NF Senior Captain John Mousy Hernandez, who also had ties to Washington State and Idaho, dropped out. He was ranked number 3 in the organization at the time and was swiftly replaced by Arthur Rock Beltran, who also eventually DO'd. Beltran did youth authority time at Perkins in 1966 and was state raised. He paroled from the YA and was rearrested in the summer of 1973 when he was given a B number. He became very active in NF politics at DVI, where he was housed in the mid-1970s and made a captain by Babo Sosa for his dedication to the cause. On March 27, 1977, Art the Rock was arrested and booked into jail for involvement in multiple murders on behalf of the NF.
In October 1978, he also defected. Beltran entered a guilty plea on 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and received immunity from future prosecution in a San Joaquin County court. Jose Prophet Herrera was an NF member in the mid-1970s. I show he became a hermit in 1976, but was then revalidated in 1982 by CDC when they were trying to sort out who is who from the Bobo Salsa factions and Black Bob factions. Prophet was housed at Soledad in 2012, and I lost track of him after that. Then there was Chago Duran, who was close to Crackers Vindiola and Joker Mendoza, as was Prophet Herrera. Daniel Richard Taco Loyola, hailed from Sanjo, was an active NF member in the 1970s.
Gonzalo Guerrero Lopez was an NF member killed by La MS Biggs Mata in the 1970s. Ray Tiny Sage Contreras Ledesma was listed only as an NF associate, but stole Cheyenne Cadena's watch after he was killed by the NF at Chino's Palm Hall in December 1972. Tiny soon DO'd and was housed at Mule Creek State Prison for many years. Hector Mad Dog Padilla was not an NF member yet when the September 1968 Shoe War jumped off, but he soon joined the organization and, like Tiny Contreras, was present when Cheyenne Cadena was killed at Palm Hall in 1972. There was also Larry Sadsack and Anthony Mousy Padilla, who were active in the NF, both from San Juan. I do not know if any of them were related, but I do know that often members of Nuestra Familia were really family related. Rudy Old Folks Patino was an NF member who supported the Chino Sinners in their war against the Ontario Black Angels in the 1970s, and is mentioned in many CDC files that I've read. Crispin Ramirez is also mentioned in C files, in Prison Gang Task Force documentation, and also mentioned him in my NF book. George Denario was an NF member that is also documented in my book, who was killed by D. Ramos and Joe Cabos in early 1976. Johnny Loco Cordoba was an NF during the 1990s, but DO'd by 2002 at San Quentin State Prison. Black Rudy Del Real was an NF member who murdered Richie Hernandez on October 16, 1976. But Black Rudy was not validated until 1979, when CDC allegedly perfected its gang ID system. David Sunshine Alvarez Lugo was an NF member in the 1970s, but I don't know if he was related to other Lugos in the organization. Vasad Ibarra is said to have been a former NF who's later a key founder of the New Flowers. Ray Castillo Janis was indicted in the 1982 NF RICO case and actually had a blood brother in La M. This sometimes happened, as also occurred with the Cordova family, and another blood brother joining the opposing organization. Now, that would have been an interesting discussion at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Louis Dump Truck Chavez was a well-connected and slick NF member sponsored in by Chente Arroyo from the Chino Sinners, who was the homeboy of my cousin, and Chente later became an NF general. I knew Chavez, who sometimes was used as a volunteer yard worker, and I'm sure he used this access to move his messages and maybe even weapons. He tried to DO in the early 1990s and was hit at C Facility New Folsom just before I left CDC. I guess he did not convince the Special Services Unit that he was no longer active and was sent after that to the Bay. Chavez was given a very hot wheel out regarding active NF and dropouts who were to be hit, but instead of passing the filter through his channels, he gave this list to his parole officer. It was also discovered that he kept some of the NF money that was supposed to be put in the bank, as well as kept some of the drugs. And that may have been enough to get him to turn for good in 2010. Mike Demon Alderete was related to the NF Alderete family and was close to Victor Wilson, who I had as a northern structure at the King County Jail, along with his brother, both originally from San Juan. George Puppet Franco was an NF captain who operated under State General Chuco Guillen and was his secretary in Pelican Bay for several years. Puppet was later sent to the Dual Vocational Institute before it shut down, and most recently has been housed at Pleasant Valley State Prison. I can't recall his first name, but I remember a guy named Maton Garcia, who was a former NF hitman that I had at New Folsom around 1990. I recall him being very close to David Bandit Wicked Rios, and they would walk around the yard together. Bandit was also a former NF member and was the brother of Robert Easter Bunny Rios, who also DO'd and was associated with a well-known Christian program, but died under mysterious circumstances in June 2020. I think they both may have been related to Philip Bruiser Rios, who was an NF captain back in the day, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Robert Huicho Gonzalez was an NF member in the early 1990s and openly bragged to La M that he extorted and taxed NorCal Sur 13 Varrios more than they did. He was deemed no good by 2002 after he refused orders from NF General Corny Tristan. Evidently, Huicho went a little crazy after putting in some more work in San Juan and fled to Mexico. He is said to have been killed in San Diego by Sur 13. Perhaps he boasted a little too much about his past influence over them. Leonard Indio Mejia was an NF member in the 1970s who was stabbed in March 1977, but was returned to prison and housed at the Bay. He was well known in the Santa Clara County jail, as were many other old school NF and associates. Crippled Jerry Salazar was a well-known NF member in the 1980s through 90s, who has also appeared in some recent YouTube videos.
Salazar was called crippled because he was involved in an auto accident when he was 16 years old that left him in a wheelchair. This did not stop him from becoming involved in Norteno gang politics. He became a Northern Structure member in 1987 and joined the NF in 1993. As mentioned previously, Pablo Pantera Peña got into a serious dispute with Art Smiley Ramirez at Pelican Bay. While Smiley declared himself to be the boss of all bosses, Pantera said he was the main shot caller. Corny Tristan de Woodland insisted that the NF Constitution reads there are to be 3 generals in the overall governing body. Again, Corny won out, and both Smiley and Pantera were ejected from the O. Pantera currently resides at Tehachapi and is 67 years old. Ronald Luck Shelton was sponsored in by Mike Mano Sosa, Pablo's younger brother, and made a regimental commander in the late 1980s after Mad Dog Cervantes demoted Louis Dump Truck Chavez to second command. Luck is mentioned in the 1982 RICO case as being involved in ordering or committing multiple homicides. Lucky later dropped out and has been housed in Mule Creek State Prison for many years.
Mark Cajas Rodriguez was involved in hit politics for many years, but later listed as no good on multiple hit lists. Jerry Bones Huesos Chavez and Marcos Huero Abundes were NF members who operated under often despised NF shot caller Lencho Guzman, who at one time was in charge of all of San Juan. James Stick 'em Up Kramer was another active NF member who often pulled robberies and later housed in Corcoran Shoe. Ramiro Gus Garcia was an NF high roller mentioned in the 2001 NF RICO case, but eventually DO'd. James Huevo Trueque and Bobby Silent Lopez were mentioned in a previous NF RICO and sent to death row at San Quentin for murders they were involved in. Herminio Spanky Serna was a Carnal sent to death row for his role in a spree of NF killings all over Northern California. Many NF criticized the O for not taking care of Spanky and other guys who they felt sacrificed a lot for the organization. Serna died of unknown causes while still being housed on death row in 2018.
Jesse Cyclone Najera was active in San Jose in the 1980s for the NF and popped for dope in Modesto around 2002. Zaragoza Capone Sanchez was from East Side San Juan and was a regimental commander in 2008. He is doing life. Then there was Epi Cortino, who later DO'd and has appeared in prison gang videos.
The exercise at least anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. You know what I mean? Both physically and mentally.
With that exercise, what are you doing?
You know, even though they took the weights, we still improvised by using magazines or what have you to make weight bags. You know, using each other, bench each other. In a prison setting, it's a hostile setting. You know what I mean? So you always got to be prepared for the unexpected when you least expect it. So, you know, you got to stay in shape for that. You know, because if you're not in shape, you're going to get your ass whipped. You know, or even worse, killed.
Victor Sleepius Esquivel was an NF captain loyal to the federal faction and is mentioned in many C-files. Samuel Luna Marquez was a state-loyal NF captain who was very close to Chuco Guillen. Luna had connections to the Sinaloa cartel and was housed at the Bay for many years.
Esteban Trujillo was another NF who was recently housed in CDC and loyal to the federal faction. He was sent to the BOP.
And then there is current NF General Sheldon Skip Villanueva and his sidekick, Robert Ponyboy Mares, deceased, who were named in Operation Black Widow and sent to the feds. They were instrumental in getting NS from other states to follow the NF program. So I think I covered quite a few major movers and shakers in the NF from San Juan, but I know I left some out, as well as some from Monterey County and Fresno County. So if you're wondering what's up with them, let me know and I'll check, see what I have on them. I don't really put out any current information, at least information that's not been out in the news or anything that's real sensitive. So don't even ask. But I hope you enjoyed this episode and learned a little something new. Again, you can check out my book on the Nuestra Familia for a lot more information on these individuals as well as associated Varrios. Thank you for watching and giving your continued support. This is Gabe Morales signing off. Gangsters, cops, and politicians.